Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now.
All right, Justin. Man, you got a trilogy coming up against Rod Costa. You guys are 1-1. You get to settle the score, so to say. Was this fight? Was this fight the fight you wanted and needed?
Um, well, coming off my last fight and then wanting to, obviously no injuries, body's all good, everything like that, wanting to get back in there and get something sort of lined up. Um, I got offered to fight on this card the night before the UFC, so that was obviously a definite sort of yes for me to be like, yes, sweet, let's do that. And then talking to Cam, he was like, all right, we'll see what we can do matchup wise. And then obviously, the other Eternal show happened. Costa fought. He lost his bantamweight title in a very close fight. Um, and then I think he was pushing for a rematch initially with the guy that he lost to, Ito. And then I think he's not going to be ready till October or something. I think there was like a bit of a delay schedule-wise or something like that. And then I think the conversation happened that they offered me to Costa and then, kind of put the fight together that way. Um, so when it was offered to me, like when I walked into the gym and Joe and Tara were like, hey, we've been offered Costa for August 17th. I was looking at it and looking at the sort of landscape and I was like, yeah, it makes sense for me to have that fight. Obviously, being in Perth, being the night before the UFC, but the storyline side of things, right? Across the board, this rarely happens in MMA, but it definitely rarely happens in the regional scene. And people like storylines. It kind of makes you sort of more excited to see a fight and see how it sort of plays out. So all of those factors, considered, and the fact that our trilogy up until this point, we've each got a decisive win over one another. So there hasn't been any sort of controversy with like close decisions or anything like that. It's been like, he got me, I got him, and now it's we're going in there for the third time. Everything's up for grabs, and I think we're both keen to go out there and shut down this trilogy, and do it in a sort of similar fashion as the first two fights. So yeah, it makes sense for me to sort of have this fight now. Like it kind of, and obviously looking at the landscape for what it is now, especially sort of in this region, this fight makes sense because there's obviously that storyline there with it being the trilogy and sort of how it's played out. Um, and the fact that it's back in the same venue as the other two fights, it's the whole another sort of big occasion around it. All of those factors sort of play into that. But also just looking at the landscape, like two of my teammates are two of the other top featherweights in the region. And then outside of that, I've fought pretty much every other featherweight in the region that you could, sort of look at, and especially all the top guys, like I fought them and beat them. So it's kind of like, yeah, there was obviously going to be this fight. I can understand how this fight sort of came together. And then outside of that, I think, Cam was sort of did say that, they'd even look internationally if that need be. So yeah, after this fight, we'll have to see what the sort of next step is because obviously, yeah, it's going to be slim pickings for me on the regional
Yeah.
scene at featherweight. So yeah, it's sort of this fight makes sense, came together really easily, which you can expect from both Rod and I. I've said it before. I think we're two of the most game fighters across the board in MMA. So I'm sure this was such an easy sort of fight to throw together. It was like probably a 2 second process either side, and we got the fight done. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But it's definitely a fight that I'm really excited for, and it's going to be on a big weekend with the UFC the following day. So yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, you and him are fighting in the trilogy. Same night, Aiden and Jack are fighting in the trilogy. It just shows you how tough the competition is in Australia. I'm pretty sure if it was more spread out, you guys would be all already signed to the UFC.
Mm. Yeah, it's obviously geographically, outside of like some of the main areas like the US and Europe and stuff, it's gonna be difficult, as a much more difficult sort of trek or pathway. Like obviously looking at the scene now as it stands in 2024 as opposed to when I first went pro in like 2017,
Mm.
there's definitely now like a more direct pathway to sort of the bigger promotions and the sport's evolved so much and so much has transpired that's like elevated the sport in the region, but it's still going to be much harder uh, sort of route to a big promotion being in this region than it would be if you were like stateside or in Europe. And even just so, I guess looking at it, it kind of makes sense, especially when you sort of get to that top level, sort of in the region, and you've beaten some of the top guys, and you're kind of sitting at the top of the rankings and stuff like that. It's going to leave room for potential rematches and potential sort of fights like this to play out. Obviously, I've had a couple of rematches in my career up to this point already, but this being like a trilogy, this is that's crazy for me within itself. Like, I mean, and I guess a few things had to sort of play out for this to even be a possibility because obviously had my last fight gone my way, then this a fight like this wouldn't be happening. Um, Especially if Rod successfully defended his belt. Even with me coming off a loss, if Rod defended his belt, I don't see a fight like this coming together. You see him defending his belt the night before the UFC um, at bantamweight. So obviously those are sort of factors that sort of set this up. But even just the talent pool itself, like even just looking at the landscape now, like obviously outside of Costa, I go through Costa, next week. I go out there and do my job and get him out of there. For me, looking at the landscape now at featherweight, like potentially I'm either looking at another trilogy fight with Diego, because I'm in a similar position with him where we've got a win at a piece, and there's that storyline there and a deeper storyline because obviously we fought each other, became teammates, fought each other again. So I mean that's potentially an option, especially he's on a bit of a win streak and got some sort of hyper momentum back. So that's the sort of thing. But then outside of that, it's I gotta either look at something internationally or um, potentially maybe look at something at lightweight because otherwise, I'm kind of sitting here going like, who am I going to fight?
Yeah, for sure. And Rod, he fought twice. His last two fights were at bantamweight. Obviously, he was the champion. Does that affect him? You think? Does it affect? Because you don't really see many guys going from bantamweight to featherweight. Like you see flyweight to bantamweight, featherweight to lightweight, but not really bantamweight to featherweight, right?
Yeah, it's obviously that's a sort of rare within itself. I've said this before too. Rod definitely fights different at bantamweight than he does at featherweight. Like obviously when he fights at featherweight, I think he said it himself too. He doesn't cut much weight. I think he doesn't even really. I don't even think he really does a sort of water cut at all. I think he just diets down because he doesn't have to do too much for featherweight. Whereas at bantamweight, he's actually got to be a bit stricter and do the process the right way. And he's obviously big and strong at bantamweight, and with his grappling pedigree and his skill set, you see what he's able to do there. Like he's able to push forward a bit more with more reckless sort of abandonment for what's going on because he knows like if I get a hold of people, there's going to be a problem. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I'm a world class, you know, world medalist in jiu-jitsu. Like his grappling pedigree is very strong. So I think that in some fights at featherweight has translated, but for the most part, not really. Because if you look at the fights, like look at his fight with Jack Jenkins, where he kind of wasn't able to sort of get the fight to the mat until like the very end, later stage of the fight, where he had a bit of success in like the last couple minutes. You know, that kind of worked against him. Same with his fight with Ethan Thomas, where Ethan was able to sort of kind of hang with him in the grappling or even nullify a lot of what he wanted to do on the grappling. Was sort of a big, strong guy himself. It's a different sort of approach between the two weight classes. Um, and even looking at our fights, like I'll be very surprised if he does come into this fight and looks to, push it to the mat and try and shoot and try and get me down to the floor where he can sort of utilize his grappling. Because I just think like he fights a set way. He doesn't, and he's a bit of a slow starter. I have no doubt that he's going to sort of come into this fight with a different approach. And I'd imagine, like, if I'm in his camp or I'm his coaches, I'm going to be like, hey, man, like, we got to use our skill set. We got to use our grappling. We are going to kind of throw stuff at this guy that we haven't in the last two fights because I just think, yeah, I think I have more tools to win than he does because, he's obviously got power in his hands. Like, I felt the power in his hands because he got me in the first fight. But, I think I have more weapons. I think my skill set's a lot broader than his. I can wrestle, I can grapple, I can strike. I've got cardio for days. Um, I think I'm pretty well rounded when it comes to this sport, and I like to think that my fight IQ and my ability to jump on finishes is very high level. So I think like definitely when I look at it like that, I have more ways to win. But then there's this unknown factor because he's the guy coming off the loss this time. He's obviously competitive just like me. He wants to get it back. He wants to shut this trilogy with like a decisive win. So I might be facing a completely renewed and reinvigorated Rod Costa. But so there's all those unknown factors going into this sort of trilogy. Like, how is he going to approach the fight? But certainly, when I look at it, he definitely fights different between the two weight classes. And I think it is pretty evident even if you watch, like, if people watch back the last fight that we had, you can hear his corner and the people, like Ben Vickers and that in the corner, like pleading for him to shoot and try and take the fight to the ground. And I don't know. I just think that that's going to be a hard task because my wrestling's really good. It's kind of what I'm known for. Like everyone knows, have a really strong wrestling pedigree. So that within itself is, getting the fight to the floor is one thing. Obviously, if he's able to get the floor, the fight to the floor, and he's able to use his grappling, like I've got to be on point because this guy's very, very good. But that's a whole battle within itself. And then you've got to factor in the range I fight at, the size, the strength. Like there's a few factors that change because it's he's not the big guy like he is at bantamweight. It's a bit difficult. So it's going to be interesting, but there's certainly a difference in the contrast between the two weight classes.
Yeah, and you mentioned cardio. Your cardio, you have it for days, and it seems like your whole team from freestyle, they all have cardio for days. I don't remember anybody that doesn't have cardio. What does Coach Joe Lopez have you guys doing? That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, man, Joe puts us through the ringer. Like some of our sessions in camp, like we have like some of our sort of fight simulating sessions and even just our lactic session that we do, it's brutal. Like we put ourselves in like the worst. Like I know a lot of people will talk about it when they do their prep and their camps, and they'll say, they put themselves in these like bad positions and in these situation scenarios where it's like as bad as it can get. But we like when we say that, like we really do that. Like it's kind of yeah. There's a long list of people that have come through the doors at freestyle that have been there and been through some of these sessions and they just left. Like they're just gone, nah, like I can't do this. So yeah, it's certainly very difficult, but it's like the stuff that we do. I know walking into a fight that I'll never lose a fight based on my cardio just not being there and just not being in shape. And I wouldn't be able to forgive myself for that anyway. Like knowing that you lost because you didn't do the one thing that you can and have control of in a fight, which is how fit you are and how big your gas tank is. But nah, Joe's definitely, he's got the secret sauce and he's sort of figured out with some of these sessions. Like even this camp, we've hit. I'd like to think we even hit some new levels with some of the stuff that he's putting us through. It's been brutal, but it's been good. So I'm feeling like always, like I'm feeling very confident within my not only my abilities, but then within my gas tank and my ability to go. No, I can go out there and push a pace for as long as I need to. Like I like to think, and I kind of say it to my teammates all the time. Going to these fights, I feel like, especially a fight like this, a 3-round fight, like I'm a 5-round fighter coming into a 3-round fight. So I feel immensely confident in my ability to keep pushing.
You've been sparring though, like for this preparation.
Yeah, so obviously I've got uh, a sort of assortment of insanely talented people that I'm sparring. Obviously, with Sebastian fighting on the same card as me, we're obviously getting a lot of good work in. Obviously, with someone like Costa and what he presents and how he kind of the way he fights, the people that I train with and their skill sets like Sebastian, Colby, Jarrett, Amina, Kasib, Volko, even Jimmy Cruz with us at Freestyle at the moment. Like all my teammates have such unique skill sets and the way they move is so different and what the threats that they have and what they present is just completely different. But it's like it's more of a problem to deal with than how Costa approaches the fight. He's not doing any crazy spinning shit on the feet. He's not doing any sort of wild, crazy stuff. Like he doesn't even really utilize kicks. Like, for the most part, he likes to just get his work done with his hands, and he doesn't mind being in the fire and kind of staying in the pocket. So I'm having to deal with like a wide array of like the craziest shit with like some of the most talented fighters, definitely in the region, and some of the most talented fighters in the world. And so like going into the fight with this sort of fight again, I'm so used to that, and that's what I'm sort of used to deal with. So even if Rod does come into this fight completely different with like a whole different style, and say he is throwing kicks and jumping knees, and he's mixing up his whole bag of tricks. I'm going to be used to that because that's what I'm dealing with every week and every time I spar at freestyle. So yeah, I'm man, I literally can't be in a better place to prepare for a fight with, I have some of the best training partners in the world and certainly one of the best coaches in the world. So it's just, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and what's your expectations, man? It's 100% finishing rate between you guys.
Yeah, I don't see a fight. Like we could fight 100 times. I don't see a fight going to the judges. I just don't think, I think, yeah, it won't happen. I think it's going to be that, like, it'll be, I'm either going to, put him out or he's going to find a way to make his way to my neck and the fight's going to be over. Like, I don't see this fight going to the judges. And I'm certainly, like I've said this already, I'm certainly not coming into this fight planning a point fight or, scrape a decision or anything like that. Like, I want to put this dude out. I want to put a stamp on it. I have that competitiveness already as, being in the sport. You have to have that. But certainly when I'm coming into a fight with Rod, like, obviously there's no malice and sort of anything like that coming into the fight, but I have this competitive urge to beat this guy. Like, I have to beat this guy and I have to be the one that puts a stamp on it and, finishes with those bragging rights. Like I've said it before, even if we didn't end up getting a fight like this, I imagine at some point we were going to have to compete with each other in something just to kind of put this to bed. So yeah, I'm certainly coming in with bad intentions, and I imagine, just the way he fights and the way he is, like, he's always looking for a finish and looking to, put a stamp on his fights as well. So I'm expecting that he's coming in with that same energy, and that's going to lead to either a very quick finish either way, or we're going to beat the shit out of each other for 15 minutes, and it's going to be very entertaining and exciting for everyone that's watching.
Yeah, it'd be wild if you guys fought and then you guys both got signed eventually to the UFC and you guys fought again in the UFC for the fourth time. That'd be wild.
Yeah, stuff like that would be absolutely insane. I mean, I imagine, like, obviously with him taking this fight with me, like, it kind of, I understand the motivation behind it. Obviously, there's because he has that, he's a competitive guy and he wants to get that one back. But at the same time, I was kind of a little surprised too, because for my money, him going and rematching for the bantamweight title, winning the belt back, and then defending it a couple times, puts him right there to get picked up by a big promotion, and kind of sets himself up again for that. Especially if he was to do that, on a weekend like this, the night before the UFC. But I do suppose that there's still all these sort of factors that are up for grabs, like with the fight between us two.
Yeah.
Certainly, you come in on a night like that and perform, and you pull off some crazy shit with all eyes on you, and it's live on UFC Fight Pass for the world to see. It's going to boost you regardless. So either way, the winner of this fight is set up for something pretty cool moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And has there been any talk about, maybe the winner of this fight versus the winner of the Featherweight Grand Prix finals? Has there been talk for the belt?
Look, it hasn't been like put in like kind of writing, but I imagine,
Mm-hmm.
depending on, yeah, I'd say unofficially, but officially, yeah, this fight's kind of like that. Like, it'll be, obviously, say Rod's able to get past me, and then I imagine they'll give him a choice and go, hey, do you want to fight for the bantamweight title, or do you want to fight for the featherweight title? Or potentially they might say, all right, you can fight for the bantamweight title, or you can have a title, like a number one contender fight to see who fights for the featherweight title against, someone else. But certainly, if I beat Rod, and say for some crazy outcome, Dimps is somehow able to get past my teammate, I'd imagine, yeah, they'd throw together myself and Dimps for a belt. Pretty sure for by some point before the year's out. I'd imagine that's the move. I mean, looking at it from their point of view, I think especially with me fighting back on Eternal, I think, yeah, they'd be pretty keen to sort of capitalize on that again, because uh, obviously I've done most of my work at Eternal, that's where I've had the majority of my fights. So, you're already kind of established there and established with the brand and established with, you know, the people that are kind of following along with the sport. So it's like, it would make sense for them to sort of capitalize on that, especially with the way this year's panned out and some of the stuff that's occurred and how much, of a shake-up I've caused in the scene over the last sort of few months. It's been, yeah, it's been
Definitely.
pretty cool. So, I mean, I think, yeah, it makes sense for them to do that. Um, Obviously, Yeah, but there's obviously so many factors, right? Like there's Rod might, I might go out there beat Rod, and he might decide that he wants to stay at featherweight and then work his way back to a title shot. He might try and go because I don't know, it's a weird spot, right? Like I know this fight's out of the bantamweight division, it's at featherweight, but if I beat Rod, I think it's going to be hard to try to throw together a rematch between him and Ito for the bantamweight title when he's coming off back-to-back losses. I don't know. It's always a weird situation, right? When people are floating between weight classes. Like, do I think that should affect him being able to fight for a bantamweight title in a fight that was so close? Like, get that rematch? I don't think so, but I can understand how, from a promotional standpoint and just from a fan standpoint, as someone that follows the sport, people might be like, "This is a bit weird. Like, what's going on?"
Yeah, for sure. One last thing, the video of Volk, shooting for the takedown. There was some kind of altercation. Did you see that? There was some kind of altercation between like MVP and some other fighter, and then you see Volk shooting for the takedown. What did you think of that?
Yeah, obviously I saw that footage. I thought it was hilarious. But like when I spoke to him at the gym, he was like talking to us about it, and he said like it was like the guy. He's like the guy wasn't being like aggressive towards anyone else. Like he wasn't trying to fight security. He wasn't trying to harm anyone else. He just wanted to get to MVP. So like you sort of see that in the footage. Like he's kind of not really engaging with anyone else. He's just got his eyes set on MVP. And but before like that sort of when the footage starts, like Volk was saying that at one point, like he sort of was in front of the guy and he was like, "Come on, man, just like relax." And then like, yeah, obviously the guy didn't try and fight him or do anything crazy. He was just trying to get the MVP. So then I think after the fact, when it all kind of settled, the other guy who was involved, whose name escapes me, he messaged Volk because he was like thinking after the fact with the incident or whatever, he was thinking about it. He's like, was that Alex Volkanovski that just shot a double leg on me, trying to stop me from getting an MVP? And apparently they had like a nice exchange, like they messaged each other, and he was just like, what the fuck? That's so crazy. It's like the last thing you'd suspect. But nah, yeah, I thought it was hilarious, but also I think it was like a bit of a reset to Volk's rugby league days. I think he just locked into business mode and kind of just went for it.
Definitely, man. Volk, one of the best guys in the game. August 17th, Eternal MMA 87. You're back in action. Big fight, man. This is a big fight for you. And I'm looking forward to seeing this, man. Thank you, Justin, always for the time and all the best in the fight.
Thank you very much.